All right. Yeah, you missed your opportunity. Okay. All right. So we're going to get started here in just a second. I want to introduce to you our speaker for today, a relatively recent member of the NAL. Dr. Robert Dempsey is retired NASA flight director, and he now works for Blue Origin. So a lot of his talk today, he's going to share insights into the new era of space and the emergence of private space flight. So the vision of Blue Origin is as grandiose as it is audacious, to have millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. So Bob's going to talk about how a company that sends scientific payloads or paying customers into space for a couple of minutes is building the infrastructure to achieve that mission. He's going to talk about the suborbital New Shepard flights and their stepping stone to the new Glenn rocket that will be taking vehicles to the space stations and to the moon. So Bob?
No video of you.
Perfect. Nobody wants to see me.
Just so you know.
I know that. I haven't turned the camera on. Okay. So Bob is like a lot of other people online and in the room. He's a classic underachiever. He received a PhD in astrophysics from the University of Toledo in 1984. He worked on the Hubble Space Telescope for 5 years, both as an operator and a researcher. And after his programming job went away, because he wanted to be involved in human spaceflight, he got on a plane and cold called USA. He joined the ISS program in 1997 as the Command and Data Handling Front Room Controller, the ODIN, before transitioning to Communications and Tracking, or CATO, in 2003. He supported numerous assembly missions, and in 2005, he was selected as a flight director. Call sign is Galileo, who, as noted by Air and Space at the time, was the oldest selected. It's a wonderful distinction to have. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. Over his 17 plus years as flight, he led numerous shuttle assembly missions, crewed and uncrewed dockings and undockings, and spacewalks, including one where the Russians removed a live pyro bolt from the Soyuz. He helped lead the NASA mission operations team that operated Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, including on the ill-fated, poorly fated, orbital flight test in 2019. He retired in 2022 from the ISS program office and joined Blue Origin. And since he's been there, he's been leading mission operations for Orbital Reef, the crewed space vehicle, and the New Shepard suborbital program, while also contributing to the new Glenn project. Like I said, he's a bit of a classic underachiever. Since July, he's been working part-time at Blue. He's already a published author. He has a beautiful website that you can click on and see all of his publications. He has over 30 peer-reviewed technical articles to his credit from his astronomy days. And he's currently working on not one, but 2 books about the Commercial Crew Program and a novel about time travel. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Bob Dempsey. Good. Go back to Zoom. Yeah, it's on. Yep. Camera's on. And let's just do the share thing.
Oh, we need to go to the first page.
And full screen.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Let's see if we can get rid of. Like I said, sometimes Zoom doesn't like us.
Are you really getting the video?
No video yet.
It says that we're still sharing. Sorry, you're seeing it? It's on screen. But you're seeing my screen. You're not seeing. All right.
Okay. Do I have to start at the jokes and everything again? Kistler, Amrock, rotary rocket. Some of these were by people that had worked at NASA and then went off and tried to make it on their own. And, you know, I think you probably can guess the story of those. None of them really succeeded. So NASA did some changing a bit. Like I said, they would levy the requirements and then the private companies would bid. But again, NASA owned everything. Some legislation in the 2000s. I only listed the NASA Authorization Act of 2005, but there was a number of others. And in 2008, NASA started a commercial cargo program. And this is a little bit different because NASA levied the requirements. Now, the intent also was to make light requirements, not, you know, thousands and thousands of pages of requirements, but more of a higher level stuff. We can have whole kinds of discussions on that. But then NASA, through like Space Act agreements, would look for companies to propose how they could meet those requirements and milestones to get there, like a safety review or an abort demo or something like that. And you know, NASA would then keep funding that to a certain degree until they finally down selected to a company that could provide those services. So this was, you know, how like SpaceX got in the door, you know, with commercial cargo. And the big difference there is at the end, while NASA gave some, you know, seed money for it, and the private companies have to invest some of their own money, that company owns all their intellectual property. And then, like in the case of like the Cargo Dragon, they could lease it back to NASA for services. And the first cargo mission was in 2012. NASA did the same thing with the Commercial Crew Program starting in 2010, same process. And the first crewed mission, again, in this case, was SpaceX in 2020. And same things are being done on the lunar payload services, LEO destinations. And the LEO destinations, for those that aren't familiar with the terminology, that's the ISS replacement. Human landing system, you know, the moon landers that companies, SpaceX and Blue Origin, are working at. So there's been some progress there. Just to briefly review some of the non-NASA related ones, Virgin Galactic. They, you know, that's the company that was founded by Richard Branson to do suborbital flights. Theirs is a different model than the Blue Origin. It uses an aircraft, basically take their crew cabin up to an altitude and then use a rocket engine to take it into suborbital flight. They first began flying in 2018. They've had 26 crewed flights, if I've done my counting right. And the latest I've heard is they're projecting commercial flights at the end of next year. And I think next year or shortly after, they're expanding up to 4 cruise ships with 2 carrier aircraft to kind of get that going. They're planning 275 flights a year when they get up and running. I will note that they don't technically reach the Kármán line, for those that are familiar with that. And we can talk maybe a little bit more about some of the pricing with that. I can't give you specifics of ours, but I can talk some generalities and some interesting aspects of it. For those that are familiar with the ISS program, they're also maybe familiar with some of the tourists that have been there. Space Adventures did that for a while, starting with Dennis Tito in April of, and I can't see the number there, so I think, yeah, sounds about right. And it was estimated that those were like about 20 million per person, 6 total. Then there's Axiom out there that's building its own kind of space station, but they've also had some crewed flights. The first one beginning in 2022, and they've had 4 missions to ISS to date. And SpaceX, they've had Inspiration 4 and the Fram 2 missions. So these are completely private missions that did not go to the International Space Station. And then we come to Blue Origin. And our first crewed flight was on July 20th, 2021. One of the things I do like about working at Blue Origin is that is a company holiday. called First in Flight. So I'm going to talk more about that. And I did also want to just highlight this. Lisa read it. The motto of Blue Origin, the mission statement, is millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. And it really is it's not just a trite statement that's hanging on the door, that's half hanging off and about to fall off. It's something that's talked about fairly regularly, and that's one of the things I like about it. And it really is a long-term vision to try and build the infrastructure. In fact, to show you kind of how long-term it is, the company has a crest. I should have made a picture of it. I didn't think of that. And on that crest, it has two tortoises to kind of symbolize, the tortoise and the hare, the slow and steady pace of it. And that's kind of their intent of it. So like some other people, other companies and stuff, to make that vision happen, it's not just building all kinds of spacecraft and stuff, but it's also lowering the costs, and that'll allow you to increase your access to space. So things like New Glenn and stuff is the way they're going to do it. So let's talk a lot about New Shepard. It's a fully reusable autonomous spacecraft. And I will be honest, when I first joined the program after working on Orbital Reef and some other programs at Blue, it was a little bit shocking to my NASA background. I was immediately wanted to drill in, the 3 fault tolerant systems and all this other stuff, and saw like, okay, well, this is not 3 fault tolerant in places, or 2 fault tolerant in other places, or 1 fault tolerant in some places. And, that was a mind shift for me. But then as I got to know the vehicle a lot more, and I saw the simplicity in some of the systems that can give you, and then some very much emphasis on some other safety and abort systems and stuff where the fault tolerance is really critical. It's a fairly straightforward, simple spacecraft. It scared my wife when I came home one day and I said, I'd fly in this thing if someone paid the ticket. But it's an interesting, different way of doing it. So it seats 6 people nominally, and crewed flights are our main focus. But we have done just some pure payload missions. We just did one in last month. And that may be the last fully payload mission, but we've also got the ability to replace a crew seat and put on some payloads and do that if we wanted to. Now, the other thing my wife said after I said that I'd be willing to fly, and she goes, "It's like 10 minutes long. Why would you want to do that?" I think it's pretty obvious, but it is a short flight. It's 11 minutes approximately from liftoff to touchdown of the crew cabin. You get approximately 3 minutes of weightlessness. It's powered by a single, what's called a BE-3PM. That's Blue Origin engine. That's probably all you need to know or care about. That powers it up to that altitude. I'll show you more details about the trajectory and stuff. And the only byproduct of that engine is water vapor. And you guys can probably guess where the name comes from. It's a suborbital flight. So Jeff Bezos decided to name it after Alan Shepard. New Glenn, our orbital vehicle, is obviously named appropriately as well. So let me tell you a little bit more about the New Shepard vehicle. The picture on the right is an actual spacecraft. The model's on the left, just showing it how it breaks apart. Maybe not the best terminology, how it separates. Starting at the bottom, that's where you have your one engine attached to the prop module. This whole section here is the propulsion module. That's where the fuel tanks are. That launches that crew capsule. That's where the 6 people are taking the ride. These are drag back brakes that are that open up as the prop module is coming back for a controlled landing. And you've probably all seen videos of like SpaceX doing this. Maybe you've seen these. When you see it live for the first time, it really freaks you out how fast this thing comes down and how quickly it's moving. And you can see those drag brakes really working like crazy to kind of keep it organized. Here's the trajectory. We launched these out in West Texas. If you've ever been to Van Horn, Texas, I'm sorry. This is where Jeff, as he was doing his cross-country trip from, I can't remember where he was living, but where he was moving to Seattle to set up Amazon, said, boy, this would be a beautiful place to launch rockets. And it is in the middle of nowhere. So it launches out there, a little bit of an altitude with the mountains. It's a ranch that he bought out there, and literally, if you stand in the middle of it, it's as far as you can see in every direction into the mountains, and even into some of the mountains. It launches up, fairly standard. It hits max Q. It has main engine cut off. On the way to its highest point, then you have the separation. Only the crew capsule hits the highest point of apogee, where they're getting above the Kármán line to get their weightlessness and their money for their ticket. Then the booster comes back, re-enters, the fins deploy, drag brakes, and the engine relights, and it lands. And I'll show you some more of that. The crew capsule comes down with 3 parachutes and lands just a little bit of ways. So here's a picture of the takeoff. You can see, the single engine. That's all that's there. Not a whole lot to throw it up there, but that's enough to get the job done. And we are working on some upgrades to that. I got some other video later on this, but here's a picture of that prop module after the crew capsule has separated, looking back down on it. So you can see that there. Here's a really cool picture of it screening back in with some of the atmospheric astrodynamic effects on it. And then the engine relights. And the first time I was out there for one of these launches, I was standing out there, and the flight director who was chaperoning me had the presence of mind right at the right moment to note that there is a shock wave when the engine relights. So you suddenly hear this sonic boom of that, and it's a good thing it's coming, because otherwise you think the worst. But very quickly, just above ground level, I can't remember the actual altitude, that thing relights, and it comes down fairly quick and lands on the landing pad. And there's the picture of the landing pad. You can see that's not just one landing. This sucker lands pretty much the exact same spot every single time. And one of the GPS guys was explaining to me why it's not exactly centered like it's supposed to be, but it's pretty reproducible. That blue origin feather is in the center. And at first, they were repainting this after every mission. And then they said, you know what, it looks kind of cool that it is getting used. So they don't do that anymore. Also adds money. Here's some pictures of the crew capsule. It is not on fire or exploding. This is just capturing when the drogues are firing to then release the mains. And then, like I said, the 3 chutes open up, and there's a terminal descent system. It's nitrogen thrusters that just prior to landing help decelerate it just to cushion a little bit. There's also a what's called a crushable heat shield underneath, which can absorb some of the impact. And here's a picture of it, the PM again on the landing pad and the crew capsule. Oh, wait, let me go back one. Oops. Here's the page up. This is a cool photo here on the left where you can see the prop module and the crew capsule landing there. By the fact that there's 3 parachutes almost symmetrically laid out, you can probably guess what happened this day. There was virtually no wind. So while that's a cool photo, it actually was probably one of the biggest problems or issues we had to work this flight, because what you don't want is it to land on the landing pad. And you know, it's one of those things, you know, the odds are extremely low, but, you know, you have to run lots and lots of Monte Carlos and get comfortable that it's going to be okay and not land there. And it didn't. So now on the positive side, it made recovery much easier because you were all right there. That is another interesting thing about this whole process. The prop module, recovering it is fairly straightforward. You drive some trucks out there, you inert the tank and engine, make sure everything is shut down appropriately. Then you have a transporter or rector that grabs it, takes it horizontal, and you just drive it back into the barn. The crew capsule lands somewhere in the desert. So you basically go off-roading over a lot of scrub to go out there and get the astronauts. So it's not like it's a planned spot. You have to be ready to basically set up a instantaneous media crew recovery type operation out in the field. Okay, let me show a couple videos. And hopefully these are coming across in the. Okay. And I'm not going to show this whole thing, but this is just a quick one to show you a little bit of the crew capsule. Okay, guess I'm not getting that to go away. Okay. Not sure what's going on with that one. Let's try this other one. Oops.
New Shepard's mission begins when the count.
We don't need the sound. This is just showing you a little bit more graphic of how the engine takes it up. Live video of it. Some paying astronauts looking out the window. Looking back down after separation around 250,000 feet. We give an automated call and a verbal call to the crew that they can get out of their seats. They get to play around for a bit. It continues to go up, and then it comes down. Here's the prop module coming back down. They're getting back in their seats. Chutes come out. Then they reef, expand, and then land. So. And with that sand, it always looks much worse than it is. But. And then the crew comes out. Oh, no. I wanted to show one more video because this is a little mind-boggling. You rocket scientists can figure out all night the lighting that's going on here. So before I push play, this is something we just did on the most recent mission. What we've got is we had several basically cameras that were attached, and they jettisoned out at various points during the separation sequence so that they can then look back and capture this. So that's a picture of the capsule just after it separated from the prop module. Now, I'm going to step off here. I know people online can't see it, but notice this little, what looks like an edge here, and watch the video. So that's the view from the camera live. I bet one of the guys that the lens had come off, but they insist, because they found it intact with the lens on it, that it's purely a lighting effect with the way it's behaving, but I can't quite get my mind around that yet. So, but it's a cool view of the separation. So. And also, this was not live, so you can't see this video. Okay, stop that. Okay. Yeah, sorry for those in the room here. Can't quite see that last part of it. It's kind of important, so I'm gonna. That's good. Yeah. So this is a list of a cumulative number of first-time astronauts over time, and we've added at the end there. Those are the ones in blue are astronauts that have flown for the first time on Blue Origin's New Shepard. That's about 74 first-time astronauts. Believe it or not, we've had 5 repeat. And in fact, next week is going to be the next launch, and there's another repeater on that one. But, you know, you can see not only are the numbers increasing, but they're increasing significantly, and I'll say more about that. The other thing that is happening is we're opening up who can go on it. Originally, the requirements were that you had to be able to, I should have pointed out earlier, but when you had the launch pad, the launch tower, you had to be able to go up the stairs and I'm trying to remember what it was like 40 seconds. And I remember the first time I read that, I'm like, well, I can understand why you have to maybe get away from a spacecraft very quickly. So I couldn't quite understand the 40 seconds to get up there. But the reasoning for that was to, between prop load and then getting the crew in and ready to launch, it's such a short window, you have to be able to get up there very quickly. After William Shatner's flight, we did add an elevator. But he did meet the requirement. He did meet the requirement. So we've also expanded it to, that was one of the main requirements, was to be healthy enough to do that. Also healthy enough to be able to sit in that position for the maximum launch window, which depending on the day and stuff like that, can be an hour or 2 or so. So that's kind of the criticality stuff. We've been able to open up. We've had some people fly that were visually impaired to some degree. And in the future, very soon, we're going to have some physically handicapped personnel. So. Okay. That's been the fun stuff so far. Let me talk a little bit about the why. Why are we doing these suborbital flights? Obviously there's one motive of profit. The company does want to make money off of this, and that is a key part of it. But it's also to build experience and competency within Blue Origin. This was really the first project they had that had any, real oomph and success. They built this rocket from scratch. They learned how to operate it, with some help from NASA folks who joined the company. But this has actually been a key thing, that it's been a seed program. And in fact, when New Glenn went to launch earlier this year, I think it was January, if I remember right, a a lot of my team from New Shepard went over to help them, to kind of show them. And, you know, it's the same sort of scene you've seen at NASA. I remember when I joined ISS, you know, we were the raw kids, you know, and the shuttle folks came over and said, hey, here's how you really do this stuff. We did the same sort of thing, you know, things that the engineers who were sitting console had never thought about or anything like that. So, you know, we taught them that. And it's helping us to learn, you know, the engines, managing the risk, the problem, stuff like that. And like I said, helped out on the New Glenn program. A little bit more, yes, that's a picture of William Shatner. Some of you, hopefully at least Mike, and you get, yep, Annette, recognize another person there. So I know at NASA, sometimes you can go from a flight controller and eventually become an astronaut. And like we just learned very recently, you know, maybe have a trip to the moon or something. In commercial world, there's other options too. The woman in this picture is Audrey Powers. She was an ADCO, an attitude control flight controller way back in the day. And she had a very interesting career path from those days, eventually flew on New Shepard, and maybe it's not a walk on the moon, but she did get a bobblehead. So, a lot of us at NASA have talked to astronauts and stuff, so you've heard probably stories from them about, you know, when they first got into space the first time, or even the 300th day in orbit, looking out. There is a kind of well-known effect called the overview effect that, you know, really kind of impacts anyone that's flown. And one of the things that I found interesting in this program is everyone that has flown on the New Shepard comes back with this kind of wow moment. And I've seen people who, you know, they're like, yeah, this is going to be fun, but you know, it's going to be a cool view and stuff like that. I've seen, you know, pop stars, I've seen newscasters, and they're like, you know, they all have different expectations, but they all come back with just the same emotional outpouring that they really can't even explain well. So it's a very interesting point. Shatner is a kind of, you may have seen some of it. He came out crying, partly because he was like, it was so beautiful, and you know, we've got a lot of problems on it. This was his quote. It was among the strongest feelings of grief I've ever encountered. The contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of Earth below filled me with overwhelming sadness. Every day we are confronted with the knowledge of future destruction of Earth at our hands, the extinction of animal species, of flora and fauna, things that took 5 billion years to evolve, and suddenly we will never see them again because of the interference of mankind. It filled me with dread. My trip to space was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it felt like a funeral. Now that's a little dramatic, but I mean, it shows that, you know, they get a very strong, powerful experience out of it. Some of you may know Wally Funk, who was in the one of the female Mercury astronauts that we had for a while. She got to fly, which was incredible. Okay, I've got to address this one since I'm sure you're going to ask something about it. Earlier this year, we had an interesting flight where we had an all-female crew. And this was interesting and challenging on a number of fronts. First of all, you know, it was a powerful team of people that were coming to fly, from, you know, Katy Perry, Gayle King, to Jeff Bezos' fiance, now wife, and some other very interesting, well-known, powerful women, I would say. And, you know, it's one thing to launch a crew. It's one thing to launch something that's noteworthy or media thing. But there were some interesting challenges that came with it because, for example, everyone had their own helicopter. Everyone had their own security detail. And when we were sitting down one day to start planning all this, my boss at the time, who was Audrey Powers at that point, said, "Oh, Bob, I did make it clear to you that you own the range, right? So you get to do all this coordination." And at first it was like, I'm used to spacecraft, but how hard can be, coordinating this sort of stuff? Well, when are the helicopters going to fly? We don't know. Depends on when they feel like it. And the security details. Well, okay, everyone has their own security detail, not a big deal. And then it was like, well, wait a second. Do we have to have a top dog security detail making decisions? If we start having issues, stuff like that. So it was challenging from that. It also brought some very interesting attention to the women that flew. They were also very, very nice and down to earth. I know that may be a cliche, sounds like. I'll just tell you one funny thing with Gail King, who is pictured there in the lower right. Yes, that's her. Thank God that she's okay. If any of you followed any of the media beforehand, she was extremely nervous. She made everyone well aware that she was very nervous. And right before the flight, we had to make a modification to the spacecraft because we knew that because we were having 6 females, that our CG was not going to be within the box that we had designed for. So we actually had to adjust the floor and some ballast. So we knew that was coming, but then when everyone weighed in and stuff, we discovered we were still short. So we had to add a lot of last minute ballast. And the way we did that is all of us ponied up various little personal items that we could put there. And when I was talking to Gail afterwards, well, actually, as soon as she walked out, one of the first things she said is, she said, "Thank God I did not pee on myself." Which I was really amazed. She was willing to say that, not in private, that was on the microphone. So when I was talking to her later, I said, I am so glad that you did not pee on yourself because my wedding ring was under your seat. And, she laughed and then she goes, "Well, why was your wedding ring under my seat?" And I started to explain to her about ballast and she goes, "Well, why is ballast important?" And I started to explain. She goes, "Oh, how do you do that?" And next thing I know, I'm being interviewed. And it was interesting because you see why she's so good at what she does, because she genuinely seemed, and I believe she was, interested in really kind of understanding that. So that was kind of interesting. So, before I say the next part, because one of the women that was on that flight, Amanda Wynn, sexual assault has been her main thing that she had been kind of promoting and talking about for many years worldwide, and because she was a victim of it herself. And literally the next day after her landing, she had calls from 5 leaders of other countries asking her to come meet with them. So it was an example of how, just trying to get, the notification like that is useful and interesting.
Michael Strahan's a big old boy. Did you have any trouble with him?
With who?
Michael Strahan.
No, I don't think so. Don't know of anything. Okay, pricing for this kind of mission, I really can't, I'll be honest, it's above my pay grade. But I can tell you, because this is public information, Virgin Galactic, when they kind of announced what they were doing, they were, targeting $250,000 per flight. And I remember them talking about how they thought for sure no one would pay more than that. Plus, if they're doing it all the time, it's, they'll get the price down to that level. When New Shepard started flying, they decided to auction off one of the first seats. And they were hoping for 250, 500,000, something like that. The winning bid was 28 million. So it's come down since then, but it's still kind of pricey. already said this. Okay. It's not just rich people, because like Amanda Wynn, like I said, she got invitations, and hers was funded with a GoFundMe. Some people just put out their own, money. We've had one astronaut, I think this is public, but I won't give details of the specifics, but he went, absolutely loved it, and then sent a child up. So not a child, sorry, their kid, which makes you realize that maybe your parents let you down if they didn't get you a flight on spaceflight. So we've also had a married couple go up. But it's been GoFundMe campaigns or sponsored by some other organization for their own money. But it is pricey right now. That's where we're at. But there's plans to change that. In 2025, we're hoping to get 10 to 11 missions in. That's almost monthly. This is a quote from our program manager, Phil Joyce, just recently. The demand is really strong. We're continuing to see sales every week, every day. That was another advantage. I mean, obviously, Blue Origin did the all-female crew partly to get some publicity as well. The estimates I've heard informally from people was that was probably $1 billion of advertising that they got out of that. We track a metric that, after every launch, how many calls do we get of people that are interested in getting more information? And then, of course, you have to kind of look at those and go, yeah, well, that 12-year-old boy from Manhattan is not going to be able to afford a ticket, so we can't consider that too serious. But after that flight, we got a lot of real serious inquiries. So in 2026, we're actually bringing on 3 new next generation boosters and capsules. You can guess why, if we're flying 10 to 11 missions a year, roughly monthly, a lot of what's involved there is kind of like the shuttle refurbishment that, you have to take the vehicle back, you have to do a lot of inspections, take things apart to check them out. And of course, things that you thought for sure were going to work, 5 flights before you had to repair it or replace it or something like that didn't quite work out that way. So there's a lot of refurb and turnaround time, and we've been getting that down. We're now doing about 20 days to turn around a vehicle. So with these 3 new boosters and capsules, we'll be able to do it even faster. And we're also design upgrades and stuff that hopefully will require a lot less maintenance and interaction. The engine's being upgraded. And then in 2027, we're targeting launching weekly. So you can guess between 10 to 11 this year and weekly in 2027, there's going to be a very steep curve in 2026, hopefully. Where we're going to be by the end of the year, almost every other week. We'll see how that goes. But you can imagine, and we're going to retire the 2 sets of vehicles that we currently have. But if we can launch weekly, that's when the cost will come down considerably. And they're looking into the possibility of a second location to launch these from. And it might be another country, not necessarily here, because we're getting a lot of interest from other countries. So okay, that's it for New Shepard for now. Then I'm just going to quickly go over a few more things, and then we'll take some time for questions. A lot of people may not realize that Blue Origin also is a rocket engine company. We have a number of different rockets that we've developed, rocket engines, sorry. We've got various ones listed here. I'm not going to go into great detail, but we've also are now the Vulcan United Launch Alliance rocket is powered by Blue Origin engines. And the BE-7 in particular is one that we're developing for the lunar lander. Here's some just different pictures of them. New Glenn, that's our big orbital rocket, also known as the Big Brother at times. It's fully reusable first stage. We are looking at reusing the second stage as well. It's got a 7-meter fairing. It's got 7 BE4 engines that power the first stage, and then a BE3U upper engine that it uses for the upper stage. It's designed to launch 13 metric tons or 45 metric tons, depending whether they go in geo or low Earth orbit, and it lands on a seabed platform. Here's a comparison picture. Now you can see why it's called the Big Brother. That is one thing I'll tell you guys will appreciate. I don't talk it in other presentations like this. When I did see the first launch, I'd seen shuttle launches and other rockets down at the Cape. So it is cool. It's still a rocket, but it is a little bit, it's a little quieter. It kind of does a buzz instead of a roar, but it gets the job done. Kind of a standard trajectory with the ship in the ocean for recovery. I got a better picture of it. Here's a nice picture of it from the top of the tower. It is a big rocket. I don't know how many of you maybe have been down at KSC recently, but I guess it's last year now. I was walking into the facility where we do the final mating of this and get it ready for launch. And literally, it was rolling out to the pad. This was prior to the launch earlier this year, so they were doing a fit test. It was rolling out to the pad, which was kind of cool to see anyway, and a Falcon 9 launched. And I'm like, it's happening. It really is happening that we're starting to do all the stuff that I thought when I was a kid would be pretty routine. There's the barge that it lands on or will land on. We weren't able to do that the first time. It's called the Jacqueline after Jeff's mother, who recently passed away. Here's some pictures of it launching. It's pretty beautiful to see those engines there firing. Really cool shot. Blue Moon, that's our lander. Yes, it is a big freaking rocket to land there. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it's just that's being readied in our unmanned Mark 1, which is going to be a cargo vehicle eventually, but the first unmanned version of it is going to be launching in the near future on a test flight to the moon. Here's a picture of the Mark 1 actually. I guess I should have said that here. Big tanks, tall, cargo. And then developing all kinds of stuff to sustain, to build that infrastructure on the moon to support long-term habitability, including cryogenic storing and replenishment of propellant. Blue Ring is our bus, which basically can host payloads up to 3,000 kilograms into different orbits. We provide all the services, command and control, downlink, uplink, everything, and you just bring the payload. We've got some contracts for that that'll be going up soon, and if I remember right, one of these was just selected as for a study for a Mars communication satellite. And then our ISS replacement, orbital reef, that's been in work since 2021. I can't tell much more than that because it's still deep in competition. And the only thing I will tell you, and I know this is going to shock you all, it looks nothing like that picture. As you can imagine, we've had, more than 1 or 2 or 5 design reviews and changes and stuff like that. Okay. That's it. So I will open it up for questions.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. You don't think you'll need to go back to the slides, right?
No, unless someone has something specific.
All right. There we go. Okay. So yeah, I've got a non-working microphone. Have a working microphone. Okay, so for those of you online, if you will please type your questions into the chat. We've got somebody who will moderate that, so we'll be able to get your So we'll be able to get your questions, but I've got the microphone for in the room. All right, so I know we have questions in the room, so yeah.
Thank you. Your Blue Moon, is it being designed to land near the South Pole?
Yes.
South Pole?
Yep.
Cool.
Literally.
There's some speculation, I think it was, kind of maybe to float the idea of using the Blue Moon Mark I and upgrading it to carry crew. I think there's a plan for a Mark II that would have crew, and whether or not that could be expeditiously sped up so that we could beat the Chinese. Can you say anything about that?
So you might need to paraphrase the question.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the question was about the Blue Moon, the Mark I and the Mark II. The Mark I is the cargo variant that was going to be the first off the assembly line. There's going to be an uncrewed demo version of Mark I that will be launched in the near future to just test out some of the parameters and stuff, some of the equipment. But the crewed version, the Mark II, that was always the plan. That's what NASA has under the contract. And I can't go into super detail, but I do know that they are trying to accelerate that as much as possible. And you can imagine what that means. It's like, hey, folks, CDR is moving up, PDR is moving up. Let's go make it happen. So,
No time frame?
I don't know. I'm sure there's some time frames on it. I just don't know what it is right now. So I mean, I think New Glenn will probably support the time frame just fine. I think if barring some major problem that comes up on it. So it's just the design and fabrication and testing of it. And then if you follow the architecture at all, the refueling is probably the biggest challenge. And, when I remember the first time talking about it, my eyes literally popped out of my head, with the, we're going to launch this and then we're going to launch that. And, in 15 minutes, we're going to dock and refuel and, this or that. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Let's see, how many vehicles have you launched at this point? Yeah.
So I'm curious, how much of your NASA experience did you bring to the work you've done at Blue Origin? Not the orbital reach stuff, that's kind of obvious, but I mean, the work that you did in New Shepard, how much of your NASA experience have you been able to use?
It's interesting because I've tried to be careful. I joined, the commercial crew part of NASA program because I wanted to see and try and do some different things. So when I went in there, I was very careful to like, hey, folks, we're not going to just do things the NASA way because that's the way I know it. I want to be open to ideas and willing to change and try some things. And I have seen some interesting things that I would not have thought I would be doing or entertaining, but actually a fair bit. Probably the biggest thing that I can point to is when I joined New Shepard, they had not flown a whole lot. It was still very challenging to kind of get the team gelling, getting the right focus. We were having lots of, launch holds. Partly because hardware, but partly, when something goes wrong, it's like, oh, how do we fix it? What do we do? And how do you train for that? Because we had really not done as focused training on malfunctions and stuff. So I actually started kind of what I call an operations excellence forum. And I started talking about, and it just so happened, well, I was going to say most of my initial talks were kind of ISS events that we learned from. But I also brought in one like, an expedition to the South Pole that I thought was interesting. But what we did is we started talking through, okay, so here's what happened. Now, what did ops do here? How did ops, help or enable the recovery here or fix things like that? And that really galvanized the team. It got them really starting to focus and seeing the benefits of it without quoting, the stone tablets or Gene Crabb's, drawing a blank on what we call the be prepared slogans. I would, parrot those kind of thoughts. And it turned the team around. When I started, literally the day I started, we had let's just say a major anomaly that was caused by the ops team. And now in the last launches, we have been routinely on time, really working. And even when there's been even serious malfunctions, watching the team work has just been beautiful. The other thing that I brought or put out there, which surprised me actually, was in one of those ops excellence meetings, I said, you know what? I want to tell you a story. And actually, Mike, you might remember this one, when we were configuring the MDMs on 5A, and there was a 1553 bus channel configuration, and we always wanted everything to be on A. And I'm like, hey, flight, let's start swapping these over to A so we can see if anything's going wrong. And we commanded one over, and the computer immediately crashed. The good thing is I was immediately able to tell the flight director the station program note that explained that software bug that I had just stepped into. But what I did is when I told that story, I was like, hey, I screwed up. And I told the flight director, hey, I screwed up. Here's how we're going to fix it. And, you make mistakes. And I can't count how many times people came up to me after that and said, when you said that, when you kind of told us that you were just like us, that really helped. And, people started coming forward with problems. Now, I also tried to institute a command error process that has not taken off yet, but there's definitely been some improvements. Let me do two quick ones from online. Yeah, how much time of 0G on the New Shepard? It's about 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes, depending on the altitude. So, do you have a question?
All right, Stokes, you've got the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, just a quick one. What type of launch abort system does New Shepard have? Have you ever tested it?
Oh, yeah. In fact, we've used it in flight. That's a good question. So the question is, what is the launch abort system on New Shepard? And what it is in that capsule, you can't see it in any of the pictures because of that heat shield underneath it, but there's a single solid rocket motor in there. And just like in other vehicles, you got a number of conditions that if the computer detects, and that's where you've got your redundancy and stuff like that to say, hey, look, something's wrong. It'll jettison that capsule. That was tested a couple times, and then in 2022, I think it was, during a payload flight, we had a malfunction on the prop module. There's someone in this room that could probably tell you a lot about that, but I'm not going to mention Wayne. But the prop module failed, and the separation happened, and if it had been a crewed flight, everything would have been perfectly fine. It worked exactly as designed. So. Yep. I'm wondering how much of your workforce has previous NASA experience, whether civil servant or contractor. That's a great question. Not as much as I would like. No, seriously. Because I think, especially in the flight operations team, I would have loved to bring more flight ops people there, but a fair bit. When any meeting, if you go to the lunar program, the Blue Ring program, New Shepard, we did just hire one of the Artemis or the Orion communications flight controllers, Terrence Brown, if you guys know him. But there's a number of NASA folks or contractors there that I've been working with. So that's been good. They've been able to bring some experience, which has been good. It can be bad too. I've seen it where some folks come in and like, hey, you want some requirements? I've got a 30-page document here. Why don't we start from that? It's like, nope. Let's start, where we think we need to do that. So.
Okay, I think what I just heard him say is that he's hiring, and I see a bunch of folks in this room who have truckloads of experience.
You're exactly right. But before you start calling, we are hiring. But the thing is, I am one of the last of the remote employees. So if you're interested, talk to me, but you are going to have to relocate. If it's New Shepard, I hope you like Van Horn. If it's other programs, Kent is beautiful this time of year. Other questions? Oh, yeah, you had one.
So we had a great presentation here a few months ago about Viper, and it was being canceled, and I understand your company has gone ahead and planning to do something with that. Can you give us an update on Viper?
Unfortunately, I can't. I do remember reading that, but I forgot what the update was. I'm sorry. I can look it up, but I just don't remember.
I did hear.
Yeah, we did.
I did hear that it was on, I think, on was it the Mark 1?
I think, yeah, contract on it, yeah.
And then there was some discussion about the differences between Mark 1 and Mark 2.
Yep.
Did you have any info on that?
I don't, so not that I can say.
Well, thanks. Thanks.
All right, any other questions?
One more.
Two more.
So Bob, on New Shepard, are your like crew or passengers or whatever you want to call them, is anybody doing science in a couple of minutes of microgene, or are these purely personal experience wise?
That's a great question. And probably everyone online heard it, but just to rephrase it, are any of the crew members doing science? Yes. It ranges. There's these things called bio buttons that where it's kind of, I'm trying to remember what we call them on ISS. There was something similar where basically you've got a cartridge which has two substances or whatever it is that you then mix together in microgravity. But there's also been some other experiments that folks have done. What I find interesting is the vast majority of these people are coming for an experience. But if there's a scientist that goes, hey, would you be interested in doing such and such? They always say yes for the most part, which is interesting because personally, because I've gone through the training and stuff, that 2.5, 3 minutes goes by really, really fast. I'm a scientist. I love science. I'd love to help a scientist out. I am not going to be fiddling with anybody's payload when I've got, a couple minutes to enjoy that. So it's interesting, but they do it. So.
On New Glenn, what's your workload for the second stage, or have you gotten there?
I'm afraid I don't know what that is.
That's the real challenge.
Yeah, I have no idea. So.
Last chance.
Main thing we did with them was to, like I said, help them set up their flight control teams. We had some amazingly interesting conversations on MMTs. What is a mission management team? Why do you need one? Mission directors, launch directors, flight directors, anomaly coordinators. And then they stole my best flight director. So that's how it goes. But that's what you want. You want to build those leaders so that they can then go out and help the rest of them.
Okay.
Is anything else online? So.
Nope. Questions online. All right. Thank you very much. All right. right, so I'd like to thank everybody for being here this afternoon. Really nice crowd. Good to see that some of us don't have to work for a living and Thursday afternoons. Really appreciate everybody who joined us online. Sorry about the little technical difficulties, and as you might imagine, there's no staff here at Gilruth to help us out this time. So, so anyways, we do plan to have a First Thursday program in November, so stay tuned for an announcement coming to your inbox soon about our speaker and our program for November. Meantime, thank you very much, and we will have this recording on the NAL website usually in about 2 to 3 days, so you'll get to watch it all over again and learn what you missed the first time. So thank you so much. She goes.